welcome aboard. I'm Jim Inkster, your moderator, and if you'd like to join the conversation, again, your number is 877-217-5757, show number 26. Every month, the governor comes by on the third Wednesday and talks with the people of Louisiana, as in you, and if you're so inclined, this is your opportunity to engage the governor of Louisiana, who has been especially busy. He's always busy, but these last few months have been particularly so, and now we're moving out of the regular session and into the special session. The fiscal cliff is now less than a month and a half away, and Governor, how do you see things right now?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that we get out of this regular session. I know the plan is to adjourn by Friday. The special session call is out. It starts on Tuesday. I also thought it was important that the special session adjourn by June 4th, which is the scheduled adjournment date for the current regular session. That way, no additional time is needed in Baton Rouge. I mean, we can get through this. I'm actually optimistic. That's my nature, as you know, but it's also informed by conversations I'm having with members of the legislature, both in the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, now that they've been through the exercise of trying to fashion a budget that is so short on revenue. I think they realize that the results are catastrophic. And so having gone through that and proven the point we've been making all along, there just simply isn't enough revenue in the forecast for next year to put together a budget that adequately funds critical priorities. It's either going to be catastrophic for health care or it's going to be catastrophic for higher education and TOPS and a whole host of other things. And so I believe we have a reasonable shot at succeeding. And by the way, I think we have to. We need to. We've got too much momentum in our state in terms of the way our economy is improving. Job creation is going well. We're doing a lot of things right, and we need to fix this cliff and then get us a good budget going forward that protects our priorities, and then you're going to see Louisiana stay on a path to prosperity and opportunity.
You got some pushback for the letters that went to people informing them that they might lose their slots in nursing homes unless the budget is resolved. Your response to people who say this was a scare tactic?
Well, first of all, it is not a pleasant thing to do. It's not a scare tactic because a tactic means it was unnecessary. It was very necessary, and I will tell you, it was caused by the persistent inaction of the Louisiana House of Representatives. They didn't fix the cliff in the fiscal session last year. They didn't fix it in the session that we called in February. And if you remember, the express reason for calling the special session in February was to fix the budget in time so that we didn't get up to the start of the next fiscal year and cause all of these notices to go out. Not just with respect to the notices, as you mentioned, to individuals in nursing homes, although there were some others who were receiving care at home through waivers, for example, but also notices from hospitals, our partner hospitals, to us that they would close their doors on July 1st without funding, and the notices that they sent to their employees. But I'll tell you, Jim, it was required for this reason, and really there are two of them. It is required by CMS that we change our rules regarding eligibility. You have to issue public notice in order to do that. It also takes some period of time to change the rules. And so you can't wait until June the 15th, June the 20th. In fact, the start of May was the date that these things were going to start, and everybody knew that. Secondly, CMS requires a redetermination. So if someone is receiving Medicaid services under one program and that program is going to be eliminated, you are required to reach out to that individual and see whether they qualify for another program that is not being eliminated. And so the only way that you can do that with 37,000 people is to actually send letters and engage them, communicate with them. And if you see the letters were written as softly as they possibly could, and it says because of possible budget cuts, these programs may end. But it talks about going through the redetermination. Finally, I would say that if they're eligible for another program, it typically takes about 2 months to enroll, be approved, and so the idea that you could wait any longer just doesn't make any sense. So we sent the letters out because it was the right thing to do. It was a requirement that we have those communications with those individuals. Now we're going to continue doing what we've been doing all along, and that is trying to pass a budget that responsibly funds critical priorities to include all of our partner hospitals, our medical schools, and these range of Medicaid services that you're talking about.
There are some prominent lawmakers in the House who say that the $648 million projected shortfall is based on Medicaid and Medicaid expansion in particular. Your response?
That's hogwash. They don't believe that either. They may say it, but they don't believe it. Medicaid expansion is saving $317 million state general fund in the current year. It's going to save a couple of $100 million in state general fund next year. You know, I have not seen any argument that they make to that effect that just bears any scrutiny whatsoever. Medicaid expansion has been a great deal for the state of Louisiana. Just consider the math. Under expansion this year, we're paying 6 cents on the dollar for health coverage. If that population is uninsured, we pay 40 cents on the dollar, and that 40 cents comes from the state general fund, precisely where we have a shortfall. The 6 cents we're paying comes from statutory dedications that we wouldn't have but for the fact that we expanded Medicaid, money that wouldn't otherwise be in the general fund. And because of the economic impact of Medicaid expansion, we're collecting more than $100 million in revenue, and the total out-of-pocket cost is $47 million for this year. So that's a ridiculous argument to make. It just does not withstand the slightest scrutiny. And if they're prominent lawmakers, as you suggested,
there was one in particular who said there are people making $100,000 a year on Medicaid in Louisiana.
Well, you know, I don't know whether that's true or not.
But isn't there a threshold?
Well, there is a threshold. It's 138% of the federal poverty level as it relates to the Medicaid expansion. So I'm not sure what particular component of Medicaid he's talking about. But I can tell you that it would be exceedingly rare for that to be the case. And if it is, we're going to do everything we can to root it out if someone is receiving services that they're not eligible for. But that's hardly grounds to condemn the whole program, which has been very good for the state of Louisiana. You know, we're one of the few states in the South that haven't had rural hospital closures, and that's because of the Medicaid expansion and strengthening the bottom line of these hospitals.
Before we go to our first caller, James in Longview, the passing of Elaine Edwards this week, who not only was the longest-serving First Lady, she was also a U.S. Senator from the great state of Louisiana. There aren't many of those. She had quite a life.
She did, and you know, she lived a long life, and certainly we mourn her passing, but we celebrate her contributions to the state of Louisiana. And I can tell you, Donna is still doing work around the governor's mansion that reveals just how important she was. And you know, just from small things like she had a needlepoint group that came over and did a lot of needlepoint that's been incorporated into some of the furniture that's there that's absolutely beautiful. But a lot of the things that Donna is trying to capture and write down as history of the governor's mansion relates to Elaine Edwards because she did spend so much time there as First Lady. So we certainly want to send our condolences out to the family. And again, we mourn her passing, but we celebrate her contributions to our great state.
Good afternoon, Jim, and good afternoon, Governor.
Yes, sir.
Anyhow, basically, I was just reading moments ago where the Louisiana legislature passed or approved harsher penalties for pipeline damage since it's critical infrastructure, and I totally agree with them. And anyhow, I do believe it's essential, and I just wanted to ask your thoughts on it, Governor. I presume you probably support it, but I just wanted to know for sure. What are your thoughts?
Well, I do support it. We already had statutes on the books that identified critical infrastructure, and this just adds pipelines to that list of infrastructure, obviously because we don't want criminal damage to anything that could result in spills and leakage and damage to the environment. And I know that this is particularly acute now because of some things that have happened elsewhere in the country. But if you'll note, James, that the bill makes a special effort to protect all First Amendment activities, those that are protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, but also our Constitution here in Louisiana, so that freedom of expression is certainly allowed. We just don't want the criminal damage to this infrastructure, which is and ought to be illegal, and so it's just specifically singled out now by adding pipelines to the list of critical infrastructure that's already protected by the statute. And so it's a bill that I do support. Don't believe it's been presented to me for signature yet, but they're coming in pretty at a rapid pace these days, and so I should sign it pretty soon. But anyway, I appreciate you calling yet again, James.
Hi, Jim, and hello, Governor.
Hi, Tara.
Thank you so much for having this show, and just for all your work that you've done with healthcare. My question is, how can you, in good conscience, sign the 15-week ban on abortion that's going to put women across your state in great risk in accessing their constitutional right?
Well, Tara, thank you for the call. And as you know from when I ran, and not just when I ran for governor, but the way that I've conducted myself in the state House of Representatives before that, I am pro-life. As I mentioned before at a press conference, I'm inclined to sign the bill. It hasn't been presented to me yet. That is still my inclination. And I am pro-life, as I mentioned. And by the way, the pro-life cuts in both directions, because the pro-life views that I have tell me that the Medicaid expansion, for example, is the right thing to do. I know that we're saving lives when people have access to health care and diagnostic evaluations and primary care and those sorts of things. But that is who I am. It's part of the Catholic Christian faith tradition that I have always been a member of, and so I mean that's just what you get with me, and hopefully you can appreciate that even if you don't agree with it.
Steve in Ruston. Hello, Steve. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Hi, this is Steve from Ruston. What I understand, two of the budget cuts involve either possibly higher education and TOPS or health care. If it comes down to it, which one of these will you endorse, and why? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. The House passed a bill a couple of weeks ago that was absolutely catastrophic with respect to health care. In fact, neither of our two medical schools were funded. None of our partner hospitals were funded. A whole range of Medicaid services were going to be eliminated. So I did not support that. The Senate took the bill and really cannibalized everything but health care. So now we have catastrophic cuts to higher education of $96 million, a $70 million cut to TOPS, and catastrophic cuts across the rest of the budget as well. For example, there wouldn't be any veteran cemeteries in operation in Louisiana. I can assure you sheriffs will be returning state inmates because the per diem that we're paying them isn't enough to take care of the cost of housing them in their jails. So I'm not going to support either approach. I expect that sometime today or tomorrow, whenever it happens, that if the House concurs in the most recent changes to House Bill 1 and that bill comes to my desk, I will take action as necessary to make sure that House Bill 1, as is currently drafted, does not control our appropriations for next fiscal year. Quite simply put, there's not enough revenue in the forecast for next year to fashion a responsible budget. I think that is clear to all but perhaps just a few legislators. The overwhelming majority, including legislators in the House and the Senate who voted for the budgets, have expressed publicly and to me their belief that those budgets are inadequate. In fact, in the Senate Finance Committee last week, they called it a pretend budget. Well, there's nothing pretend about the cuts in the budgets, and there's $640 million worth of expenditures that the Senate thought was important to include but couldn't fund them, so they're actually below the line. That's unconstitutional. So, Steve, I'm not going to support any of that. We're going to fashion a responsible budget for the state of Louisiana and, at the same time, give a $400 million reduction in the net tax burden on the state from this year to next year.
Joel in Ponchatoula. Joel, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you for trying to build a relationship with the community, Governor Edwards. I have a question in relationship. I live in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, and I work for a nonprofit agency that provides services to adults with developmental disabilities.
Yes.
I've recently heard a lot of talk about the notices that went out to nursing homes and such like that, but I haven't heard a whole lot of talking about is the talks of cutting some of the waiver services that are used to provide independent living and enrichment programs and different services for these adults who are diagnosed with developmental disabilities and who are oftentimes unable to take care of themselves. Some of the waiver services that have been talked about being cut with these budgets include things like independent living, which allows these adults to live in the least invasive environments as is guaranteed them by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and many of the regulations that have come out of the federal government since 2012, 2010. I guess my question is, I want to know: is this going to be a priority for the state of Louisiana to provide these services to those among us who need them the absolute most?
Joel, thank you very much for the call, and I am aware of the programs that you're talking about, those services, and how critically important they are. And a lot of the talk has been about care in nursing homes, but for example, the long-term care special income level program, that program applies not just to nursing home patients, but also to individuals who without it are ineligible to take advantage of the waivers they get for at-home services, the types that you were just mentioned. And clearly, we do not support those cuts that were in House Bill 1 as passed by the House that would be absolutely devastating to health care across a broad spectrum of services. We can do better, and Joel, I want to thank you for working with this particular population and tell you that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that those cuts don't happen. It's why I called a special session so that we can fix it, adequately fund our critical priorities. And I think you're right. And the note that you hit there at the end is one that I make very often. We ought to make sure that we fashion a budget that reflects our priorities as it relates to taking care of the least among us. And that's the people that you're talking about. And so in a very real way, Joel, you're doing the Lord's work, and we ought to do better than we're able to do with the budget as it's currently drafted. And so I can assure you that the budget that the House and the Senate have taken up and that exists today will not be the document that guides our appropriations and our operational expenses for the fiscal year that starts July 1st.
Sabrina in Lafayette. Hello, Sabrina. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor Edwards. Sabrina.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, and recently attended a One Acadiana meeting where I was enlightened about potential cuts that would affect the Louisiana University healthcare system in Lafayette, which serves thousands and thousands of people in our community. And two things were brought up at the meeting that I would like the governor to comment on if he was so kind. One of them that was that 30% of the budget is not constitutionally protected, which includes the safeguards to keep these facilities open, and also that 70% includes corrections or our state penal system and incarceration. So I was wondering, how that plays in the governor's mindset, and then.
All right.
Well, Sabrina, thank you very much for the call. And I will tell you, the state of Louisiana has a great partner in Lafayette, Lafayette General in particular, that is running the LSU hospital there. And like all of our partner hospitals in each of the last 2 years, because of budget constraints, we've actually reduced the funding that is available to them. But it's critically important that we keep them open, keep their doors open. And what I committed to do publicly back when I submitted the executive budget proposal was that if we could fix the cliff, which is at $648 million, meaning of the $1.4 billion expiring on June 30th, if we can maintain $640 million of that, then we will fund our partner hospitals at the same level next year as we are doing this year. And that's critically important for the stability they need in Lafayette to keep those doors open and continue to serve that population. There are tens of thousands of just outpatient clinic visits that are critically important for the entire Acadiana region. Now, with respect to the way the structure is, it is true that the total state general fund is about $9.5 billion. But what's available in terms of discretionary state general funds that you can actually cut in order to meet downturns is about $3.5 billion. Within that discretionary state general fund, the healthcare component is by far the largest. Now, corrections is not constitutionally protected, so I don't know if that's what you were getting at or not, but it is not constitutionally protected, but obviously critically important that we fund the Department of Corrections.
We're finishing up a regular session, headed for a special session with a fiscal cliff less than a month and a half away. Passions are high at the Capitol, and that was evident. There was apparently a fistic encounter between a couple of lawmakers.
There was, and it's unfortunate. They're both good friends of mine, and by the way, they're good friends with one another. Every now and then, people become a little too passionate, and just like happens, I guess, in families and among friends, things can get out of hand. So it's unfortunate, but I know those two individuals. They're going to continue to work together, and I count them as friends of mine as well. And so it doesn't exactly reflect well on the House and the Senate and the legislature or the state government, but I think it's something we can all forgive and get past.
There is a deadline in a few months, July 20th, on the Homeowner Assistance Program. This survey that you have been touting now for a year and a half, what's going on here?
Well, just about, and in fact, I think everyone who is a homeowner that was impacted by the floods in 2016, if they've already applied, if they've already taken the survey, they've been invited to apply. So what we need to do is start closing the program out, and we're asking everyone who was impacted by the floods, whether it was in March or in August of 2016, if they have not yet completed the survey, that they do so. There is a deadline of Friday, July 20th, so there's some time left, but not an awful lot of time. And we're asking them to go to restore.la.gov, restore.la.gov, or they can call 1-866-735-2001 and speak with the representative in order to complete that survey. Even if you have a homeowner out there who thinks they may not be eligible because of where they live or because they may have received a small business administration loan or applied for a loan and there may be a duplication of benefits problem, we're asking them all to take the survey because we continue to press HUD and Congress and the White House for relief from the duplication of benefits problem that is keeping so many homeowners from actually taking advantage of the program. And if that relief comes, it'll only be available to those people who've actually taken the survey. So we do need every homeowner out there to complete the survey. The deadline, again, is Friday, July 20th.
866-735-2001 is the number for the survey. 866-735-2001. You went to a state dinner since we last saw you. You and the First Lady. That was quite an experience.
I did. It was a lot of fun, and I thank the White House and President Trump for inviting us. There was obviously a strong connection between the state of Louisiana and France, and that's why I was invited along with Senator Kennedy and Senator Cassidy. But it was a great treat for me to be able to go there with Donna, and it was a wonderful time, and it was historic. It was President Trump's first state dinner. And again, given the connection between Louisiana and France, I thought it was fitting that we go. And it was sort of funny because, as you know, there was some attention to the fact that I was invited because I was the only Democratic elected official, at least, who was invited to attend. And the president certainly made note of that whenever Donna and I walked into the room to greet him. But it was funny, and he was joking. And anyway, it was a great experience. And by the way, I was very pleased to escort my wife, who I've been married to almost 30 years. And I will tell you, I don't know that I ever saw her more stunning than she was that evening when we went to the White House.
There was a lot of talk about the jambalaya.
Well, yes, the jambalaya was on the menu. Rice was on the plate, and the rice was good. And I don't really mean that as a criticism. It just was not jambalaya.
Well, I think the president has said that you're his favorite Democrat. Has there been any effort to recruit you to the Republican Party?
Well, some very. First of all, I'm not going to do that. So I don't want any answer that I give to lead to further speculation. I am a Democrat. I was elected as a Democrat. and I will stay a Democrat. But there have been a couple of attempts, perhaps, but pretty. I'm not anything that is worth talking about, to be quite frank.
You didn't take it very far?
No, in fact, I thanked them for the call and told them that wouldn't happen.
Sarah in Baton Rouge. Hi, Sarah. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you. I am a registered Republican who is proud to say that I voted for Governor Edwards.
Thank you,
My
Sarah.
question is this. The majority of us in the workforce, when we are given an assignment and a deadline, if we fail to meet that, we are fired. Why, as a taxpayer, should I continue paying for special sessions because the legislature is not getting their job done in the time allowed that we're already paying for to begin with?
Well, Sarah, first of all, thank you for the call. It is a great question. I will tell you, nobody is more frustrated than I am with the absolute inaction by the legislature. And I have to tell you, it's not really the legislature, it's the House of Representatives, because the fix that we're in that requires changes as it relates to revenue, those items have to originate in the House. And in the regular fiscal session last year and in the special session earlier this year, not a single bill, not one, that would fix the cliff ever made it out of the House of Representatives for consideration by the Senate. But you will be happy to know that I have called for this special session to start on next Tuesday, May the 22nd, and to conclude by June 4th so that there will not be additional expense to the state of Louisiana. There will not be any per diem involved in that special session that would not have been paid during the regular session. It is my hope, my expectation, that we will be successful this time and that yet another session later on will not be required. And that, again, that hope is informed by an awful lot of conversations that I've had with members of the House and the Senate who tell me they now recognize the problem. I'm not sure why they didn't recognize it before, because the Revenue Estimating Conference has been telling us about this cliff. We've known about it for a long time. In fact, the legislature knew about it because they actually created it. And they set all this revenue to expire on June 30th, $1.4 billion worth. And I want to tell you and Sarah and everybody else, we can implement my plan, give a net tax cut to the people of Louisiana by $400 million and adequately fund our critical priorities if we will just maintain $648 million out of the $1.4 billion that is expiring. That's why this is in the category of easy things to do if we will simply come together and be Louisianans, not Democrats and Republicans, but let's be Louisianans for 2 weeks. Let's fix this problem, and the people of Louisiana will be much better off as a result.
Narissa, thank you, Sarah. Narissa in New Orleans. Hi, Narissa. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Hello, Governor Edwards.
Hi, Narissa.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm just wondering why we don't have recreational marijuana in New Orleans.
Okay, if I understood the question, why don't you have recreational marijuana in New Orleans? Well, I will tell you that I do not support legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes. I have, as a legislator and as a governor, I've actually signed bills dealing with medicinal marijuana usage. I am not there on the recreational side. I don't know that I will ever be there, but I think it's premature for us to consider that until we have more time to look at what's happening in states like Colorado and elsewhere where they have legalized recreational marijuana and find out what all of the impacts are there, whether they are beneficial or detrimental, and learn from their experiences. But I will tell you that recreational marijuana use is not something that I can support as legalizing, or quite frankly, I can't support decriminalizing. And I know there's a slight difference between the two, recreational marijuana.
The U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision this week that's gaining a lot of attention about sports betting. This is now a possibility in Louisiana. Is it something you're going to look at?
Well, certainly we should look at it because we obviously have gaming in Louisiana already. We have establishments that can do this. Danny Martini, senator from Jefferson Parish, he had actually filed a bill in this regular session to ask the legislature to approve sports betting in Louisiana. His bill was actually, I think, referred to the Senate Finance Committee, where it never moved again. And yesterday, as I was putting together the final list of items in the call for the special session, there was some individuals who asked me to consider to put sports betting on the call. I did not do that because in a 2-week concentrated session, I wanted to focus on fixing the cliff and making sure we can have a reasonable budget for the year that starts July 1st. Sports betting would only be allowed in those parishes that approved it in a referendum. We still don't have all the rules necessary about how it would be implemented, how it would be taxed, and so forth. And I don't believe at the end of the day it would produce revenue for next fiscal year. So I did not put it in the call. The legislature's free to bring it back up next year in the regular session.
What about the Harrah's deal that is floating? Is this something that you've looked at closely as far as whether or not you can be supportive of it?
Well, obviously, I have looked at it closely, and I've expressed some reservations to the folks at Harrah's, but also to the mayor and council in New Orleans and to legislators both in the House and the Senate. First of all, I think it would be a good thing to have a bill that was worthy of support and passage so that we can get that $350 million investment in downtown New Orleans, create the 900 jobs that are at issue, and actually get to the increased payments, both to the city and, as the governor, more importantly for me, is to the state. I just need to know that it is a good deal. And obviously the bill as it came out of Senate Judiciary B is a much better bill than left the House because there's more upfront payments. There's payments due to the state if the option to sell the property is exercised and it's converted into a real estate investment trust property. And I think it calls for more payments on an annual basis going forward. And so I'm going to wait and see what the bill looks like if and when it hits my desk and evaluate it and see whether it's worthy of passage from my perspective. But clearly it's a better bill now than it was a week ago.
Both the House and Senate, by overwhelming margins, passed measures to get rid of the non-unanimous jury verdict in Louisiana. It goes to the vote of the people in the fall. Have you taken a position on this?
Yes, and I support it. Look, we're an outlier here. We shouldn't be. If you look historically at the right to trial by jury as had to have been contemplated by the framers of our Constitution, I'm talking about the United States Constitution, they meant a unanimous jury. And that was the only thing that was contemplated at the time. In the late 1800s, really in a response to Reconstruction, a state constitutional convention actually made it 9 out of 12, and that was changed to 10 out of 12 in the early 70s with the last constitutional convention. But I don't believe anybody should be convicted of a felony without a unanimous jury verdict. And so I'm encouraging, first of all, I appreciate both the House and the Senate for passing this. And I would encourage the people of Louisiana to vote for it, and let's put ourselves squarely in the mainstream and not be the outlier on something this important.
Ross in New Orleans. Hello, Ross. You're on the air with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Hi, Ross. Thank you for calling.
I have a question specifically on the issue of medicinal marijuana.
Yes, sir.
I'm in my 70s. I suffer from serious and constant chronic pain. I had a bad couple of years when they prescribed opiates, and I insisted on getting off of them. I think they're poison. My doctor now wants me to try medicinal marijuana.
Isn't there a bill right now in the legislature? Thank you, Ross.
Yeah,
Ted James.
Yeah, Ted James has a bill, and quite frankly, Ross, as I sit here, I'm not sure where it is in the legislative process. I know that when we approved medicinal marijuana, it was for just a few conditions, and chronic pain was not one of them. I know that the bill was introduced, and
His would address that.
His would address that. I will tell you that a couple of years ago, the last time I really talked to a number of individuals in the law enforcement community, they were concerned about expanding medical marijuana for chronic pain because they thought that that would just bring in too large of a universe of potential users and were really concerned about it. But I haven't had any of those conversations this year since the bill was brought. And so I will give it a good hard look if the bill hits my desk. I'm not prepared today to announce whether I would sign it or veto it, and I wish I knew exactly the process where the bill is. Oh, so the bill, I was just told, is passed the House and the Senate, but in different versions. And so a conference committee is going to be created, 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate, to see if they can come up with a version of the bill that the conference committee can support. And then if they do, the conference committee changes would have to be approved by the House and the Senate all before the legislature adjourns, which could happen as early as this Friday. I will then give the bill a look if should it reach my desk and make a decision then.
Mac in Metairie. Mac, good afternoon. You're on the air with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Inc., and good evening, Mr. Governor.
Hi, Mac. Thank you for calling. I'm fine.
I have a question, and my question is referred to the legal system. Some years ago, I was arrested and charged with a crime, and 10 years after I was in prison, I come to find out there's something called a discovery. I received my discovery, and just as I was saying in court that I was totally innocent, but I somehow, I don't know, being coerced, fell into the plea deal, and I'd like to know what can I do, how do I go by clearing my record?
Well, Mac, I am an attorney. I've never practiced criminal law, and I would encourage you to retain an attorney if you can. Otherwise, go to a legal aid clinic and see if they're available to for this purpose. Typically, arrests are cleared through expungements. I don't know whether you're eligible for one or not because I think you said you pled guilty, and it sounded to me like you may have served 10 years or more in prison, and I'm not sure that an expungement is available to you. So I really just don't know how to answer your particular question. I would just encourage you to find a criminal lawyer if you can. But if you'll stay on the line and give your information to Tucker, I will try to have somebody call you back with a little more precise information.
Evan in New Orleans. Hello, Evan. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hi, yes, thank you. Hi, Jim. Hi, Governor Edwards. Thank you for
Evan.
taking my call. Hi. So my question concerns the Bayou Bridge pipeline. Given our rich history with the industry through the Atchafalaya and the Mississippi deltas, I'd like to ask if you have any concerns about the project, and to tie into that, if there's anything that you'd like to say to residents in the communities that would be affected by the bridge that are opposed to the project at this time. Thanks.
Evan, thank you very much for the call. First of all, the portion of Louisiana that is at issue with respect to the Bayou Bridge pipeline is an area that has a number of pipelines currently, and so we are going to have to find a way that moves these petroleum products to the refineries. And I will tell you, I believe that a properly constructed modern pipeline is the safest way to transport these products. It's not by truck, it's not by train, and we see those accidents all over the country as well. The one thing I can assure you is that unlike may have happened decades ago, no corners are going to be cut. This pipeline company that constructs the Bayou Bridge is going to have to follow all of the rules, regulations, permit requirements, and laws. They're going to have to make sure that they properly construct, maintain the pipeline, put the spoil where it belongs, and make sure it doesn't interrupt the flow of water. And when we do, we're going to have, I believe, the most reliable, safest way to transport this material. And the only thing I can say to the people in the region is what I just said to you, Evan. That's my commitment as governor. You know, you have to manage competing interests. Environmentalists have a legitimate concern based on some things that have happened here in the past, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, we have industries along the river, over in the river parishes, that need access to these products, and I think this is the safest way to get the product to them, and we're going to proceed with the Bayou Bridge pipeline.
Well, the governor will return on June 20th. A lot will happen between now and then.
I am praying, I'm hopeful that by then we will have resolved our budget problems. We will have a House Bill 1, an appropriations instrument that reflects the desire of the people of Louisiana to adequately fund our critical priorities, including health care, higher education. We shouldn't have a $70 million cut to TOPS. We can't sustain a $96 million cut to our higher education institutions. And we're not going to close our partner hospitals or kick people off of their critical Medicaid services or defund our 2 medical schools. I mean, these things that the legislature's been talking about over the last couple of weeks are catastrophic for this state. We can give a $400 million tax cut from this year to the next and fund our priorities. That's my plan. That's what I look forward to the legislature doing, and I'm going to work with them every day to make sure that happens.
That starts next week, May 22nd. The session will end by June 4th, and of course the fiscal year ends on June 30th. And we're less than 17 months from a governor's election, and I'm under the impression you will run for re-election as a Democrat.
I shall.
You shall.
Thank you.
And thank you, Governor John Bell Edwards. And